May 1994. Ethnic strife rips the former Yugoslavia apart in a modern European Holocaust. Bloodletting, not seen since World War II, revisits the continent. 800 such days have preceded this, and the world has taken little heed of the carnage. But when an artillery shell explodes in Central Marketplace, a British news crew captures the images that force Western powers to take notice. NATO leaders convene and confer, but take no real action. With the flow of new victims come rumors of a new horror. There is talk of concentration camps, mutilation, and mass murder. The vocabulary of genocide mingles with the cries of the wounded. In Yugoslavia, even government leaders are in denial of the emerging Holocaust.
50% of alleged camps that I have visited, and I have not found concentration camp.
Images of a devastated society bombarded the West, and over time, compel American President Bill Clinton to act.
There are still times when America and America alone can and should make the difference for peace.
Soon, a 40-year-old creation of the Cold War will take to the skies over Bosnia.
And you see planes flying over, and they monitor genocide. Today they took a picture of those killings. They saw everything.
Launching from an airstrip in southern France, American U-2 pilots will keep a constant vigil over the warring factions below. 15 miles above the killing fields of the former Yugoslavia, the Lockheed Utility 2 carries out a mission little changed since it first confirmed the existence of Soviet missiles in Cuba over 35 years ago. Instead of missiles, pilots searched for photographic evidence of ethnic cleansing. Flying toward the edge of space, a U-2 is a free bird of peace. But this, like most reconnaissance operations, is anything but peaceful. Since 1950, over 100 spy planes have lost their lives, flying secret missions over foreign lands.
There's an old saying that reconnaissance flies alone, unarmed, unafraid, and unheralded. And that's true. And people don't realize how brave these men are. They put their lives on the line every time they fly one of these missions. Not only from defenses, but also from the possibility of an engine failure.
We may never know the names or exact numbers of lost men. The U-2 is notoriously difficult to operate. Pilots call her the Dragonlady. It is for a good reason. The U-2 functions in what aviators describe as the coffin corner. A 10-knot window where if they fly any slower, the aircraft will stall, and any faster, and the plane will rip itself apart. At 70,000 feet, oxygen is so scarce that the jet engine's flame often goes out in mid-flight. The plane is subsonic, no faster than most commercial airliners. An engine flameout threatens the best defense it has, extreme altitude. 15 miles above the Earth, the air is much too thin to breathe. Atmospheric pressure is nearly non-existent. The U-2 pilot functions at an altitude where a sudden loss of cabin pressure would cause him to black out in 3 seconds. and all of his bodily fluids to boil off in about 6. Because of this, he wears the same flight gear as a NASA astronaut. Straining to control a plane in the thickly layered suit causes pilots to sweat up to 10 pounds every mission. Many who washed out of the U-2 program do so because they cannot handle the claustrophobic nature of the flight gear.
Your vision is somewhat restricted, obviously. You can look pretty much over your right shoulder and left shoulder. You're a little bit removed from everyone else. You're now in kind of your own atmosphere, if you will, in your own little environment in there. And you hear the valves of the pressure suit as you breathe.
The work alone in radio silence, flying up for 9 hours in racetrack patterns above the Yugoslav republics. Along the way, they will gather over 2,000 photographic images of target areas pre-programmed into the plane's flight and optical computers. The serenity felt sailing through the cloudless frontier belies the tragedy playing out on the killing fields below. It is perhaps the ultimate solitude. The men in the cockpit call it the breakaway phenomenon.
Flying at altitude is it's very peaceful. Nighttime tends to be very impressive for me because you have so much less atmosphere. The sky appears to be much brighter, and there's a definite perception that you don't get from Earth. Moon rises below me and falling stars that burn up below you. And very rarely do we have clouds to deal with at altitude, so typically your view is quite spectacular.
The U-2 was the first aircraft designed specifically for America's spy agency, the CIA. Even today, the plane is veiled in secrecy, and many details of Cold War missions remain classified to the year 2010. Using tools no more sophisticated than the slide rule, the legendary Kelly Johnson and his team at Lockheed Skunk Works brought the plane from a pencil stretch to a test vehicle in just 8 months. When it first flew in 1955, this aluminum machine weighed just 17,000 pounds. Today's U-2, stuffed with some of the most expensive black boxes money can buy, weighs more than twice that. America's spy planes are some of the nation's most closely held secrets. Many of these boxes, and the men who operate them, remain shrouded from public view. Unfortunately, this hasn't always been the case. In 1960, U-2 pilot Francis Gary Powers was downed by Soviet missiles over Russia. During the Soviet media circus that followed, some in the intelligence community denounced Powers for not having used the suicide needle supplied to him. Today's violence still live in a black world. Whether or not the American spy planes can now evade an enemy missile is something even a retired officer will neither confirm nor deny.
You actually get a warning in the cockpit if you're being...
I can't talk much about that. I can say, well, I can say that we knew that we were being tracked. I can say that, but I can't really talk anything about the systems.
Within minutes of landing, the ground sensor crew removes the 105mm camera from the aircraft's bay. As always, timing is critical. Fluid teamwork ensures that 2,000 photographs taken on the mission will be processed and printed in less than 90 minutes. If rumors are true, somewhere amidst the 10,000 feet of film lies evidence of human tragedy more detestable than war itself. It is one of the oldest tools in the aerial reconnaissance craft. Even in today's world of spy satellites and radar imaging, the photograph retains a favorite status in the intelligence community. No method is more cost-effective or as reliable. Perhaps it is because the camera sees as the human eye does. Perhaps it is because a picture is still worth 1,000 words. At the photo interpreter's light stand, the first undeniable signs of genocide appear. A single U-2 print typically covers a region of about 8 square miles. To the untrained eye, these wide area views may seem innocuous enough. But the tools and techniques of the CIA's National Photographic Interpretation Center leave little room for doubt. Able to magnify images 250 times, CIA photo interpreters are really highly skilled detectives. Detectives who combine what they see on the light stand with what they hear from operatives and eyewitnesses in Bosnia to create a complete intelligence picture.
We in America have developed the analyst as the center of central intelligence, to look at all the information, not just the secret information, but everything, and then put it together and tell us what it means.
By midsummer of 1995, U.S. officials are armed with the photographic evidence they need to publicly expose Serbian war crimes. On August 9th, CIA Deputy Director John Gannon testifies before Congress.
What you're moving to now, Mr. Gannon, has been obtained in what way?
This is aerial photography, U-2. What intelligence has done, sir, is we have, at the end of this, been able to show you, quite apart from the human suffering, we have been able to show you a pattern that we can say with confidence that this pattern of abuse took place in over 3,000 villages of Bosnia.
The presence of ground scarring in dump trucks corroborates the stories of mass graves told to reporters and relief workers by the survivors. When investigators are sent to examine the freshly moved earth, they find thousands of shallow graves where members of the Serbian National Army hastily buried their Muslim victims. Soon, 12,000 additional UN troops will be sent out to stop the bloodshed. In the skies above Bosnia, an aging Cold Warrior helped bring an end to a post-Cold War genocide. Aerial photographs, like those that documented mass murder in Bosnia, were critical in efforts to stop the killing. In today's aerial intelligence game, however, photographs alone often no longer suffice.
You have first your standard photo. Okay, that's a black and white photograph. Now, the black and white photograph is good, but it doesn't penetrate foliage. Radar will penetrate foliage, and you can see what's going on the ground. For example, if a truck or tank is under the foliage, the radar will pick it up. Now then, you add infrared, you can see the tank, but the infrared will indicate that the tank is hot, that the engine is on.
The U-2 has adapted well to modern times and is no longer restricted to photographic intelligence gathering alone. Some aircraft carry a special antenna that the pilots call C-SPAN 3. With it, the photographic and radar images can bounce up to space and, via orbiting satellite, relays straight down to ground stations, like this one in the California desert. When combined with cutting-edge radar imaging technology, these systems provide a real-time intelligence. The ability to gather data over distant battlefields and within seconds convey it thousands of miles to political and military leaders at home.
We're all used to being watched. All kinds of military and intelligence people are just perfectly used to the idea that the other guys are photographing us from space. And, you know, whether you like it or not, that's how we operate.
In a world blanketed by spy satellites, some thought that the need for spy planes would diminish. But as the demand for real-time intelligence has increased, so has the need for flexibility. And flexibility is the one thing that billion-dollar satellites just do not have.
You do have some ability to hide certain toys you might be playing with. You can't make your whole nerve gas factory disappear because it's a huge immovable object, but you might be able to make some trucks go away or whatever it is, or you could put aircraft in hangars. A sophisticated foe can predict the arrival time of the satellite by tracking it on radar so they can evade certain types of detection. Now, if a fast airplane comes blasting across way up in the sky on a flight path that they had no way to anticipate at a time that was, of course, not announced in any way, it's like, oh, they took our picture. Damn, it happened, you know?
Because the Dragonlady is so difficult to fly, U-2 drivers depend on the eyes of a second pilot called a mobile, who follows behind them in a Z-28 Camaro.
What we normally do is just slip in behind and just kind of sheepdog along behind the plane, make sure that he's not going to get himself into any problems with his taxi. Because the wingspan is so large, we need to keep a safety observer following the plane whenever it taxis around. It's very hard from the cockpit to see exactly where your wingtips and your outrigger wheels are. On some configurations, you can't see the outrigger wheels at all. This truck over here is the pogo vehicle. It's the crew that's going to go out on the runway and recover those outrigger wheels when they fall away during the takeoff sequence. Takeoff normally offset a little bit from the center line so that the crown of the runway doesn't make the pogos fall out too early. And on a lightweight aircraft like he's got, he'll be airborne by here easily. Pogo crew's coming out and removing the pogo pins, which releases small little teeth up in the wings that hold those things in. So they're able to free fall away now as soon as the wings start to flex up and create lift. Meanwhile, I'll take a look around the outside of the plane, look for obvious leaks, incorrect configurations, make sure the lights are working right, trim is set.
Confirm, Canyon 5-2, clear for takeoff. Canyon 5-2, affirmative.
Cleared for takeoff. Gonna run the power up to 80%. Check the engine instruments, release the brakes.
With a massive 103-foot wingspan, the U-2 is more giant glider than jet. Upon its takeoff, it rises like a feather on a thermal wind. Landing is another story. From altitude, it takes the pilot over half an hour to coax the plane to Earth. As he nears touchdown, the pilot uses pumps to redistribute the fuel left in his wing tanks so that they are balanced during the landing.
All our pilots pull double duty, by the way. All U-2 pilots are qualified as mobile officers. You usually will do about as many mobiles as flights. It's almost a one-for-one.
5-2, touch and go.
Mobile copies. Alright, he said he's going to touch and go on this one, so his fuel must be down low enough. The landings are very unique. There really isn't any instrumentation or anything that helps you land it. The little voice in your ear from the mobile gives you a good feeling for where the runway is, but the rest you kind of just have to get really zen with. And it's all out the window and very heavy stick and rudder. kind of inputs required to get the plane onto the runway, because it's very heavy to fly down low at slow airspeeds. The visibility from the cockpit is not good, left and right. You don't have very much peripheral vision. That's what gives you your sense of sync. So that little voice from the mobile helps quite a bit also. It's very fun driving the car. It's a little hard to get used to running down the runway at an aircraft that's getting ready to land, though. It's inherently unnatural. 4, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. It's a very challenging plane to land because it's obviously got that bicycle kind of configuration on the landing gear. So you've got to always land at tail wheel first, and you have to continually balance the wings because those outrigger wheels aren't there after it takes off.
A sudden crosswind can tip the U-2 off-center. Even the most experienced flyers rely on reinforced skids on the wingtips. They fly alone and carry no weapons. Instead, recon pilots depend on 3 crucial means of survival: surprise, altitude, and sheer speed. Something the U-2 has never had. Over 35 years ago, Gary Powers was knocked from the sky by a Soviet missile traveling twice the speed of sound. It was at that moment the CIA began their quest to fulfill this need for speed. Soon, American designers launched their newest black project, one that would create an aircraft able to fly faster and higher than any Soviet missile technician could ever dream. The SR-71 Blackbird. This biplane would be part aircraft and part spaceship, a machine that would travel on 3 times the speed of sound and reach altitudes greater than 90,000 feet. In late 1961, the CIA turned to a proven group of men to transform this dream into reality. Soon, Kelly Johnson and his Lockheed Skunk Works team are again at hard work. In a pre-computer age, they create an aeronautical marvel 3 generations ahead of its time.
I'm a little bit surprised that Kelly Johnson even had the audacity to attempt anything as difficult as this when the likelihood of failure is so great. I remember on our early airplane, while we were having so much trouble, I asked him one time, I said, if we're able to get 1,200 miles out of this thing, nautical miles, will you deem it successful? And he says, yeah, I'll think that's very successful. And hell, we got twice that.
What they got was the fastest aircraft ever built. Pratt & Whitney J-58 engines, big enough to power the Queen Mary, launch its 140,000 pounds of body to the edge of space. The bullet from a high-power rifle leaves the barrel at about 3,000 feet per second. On a routine mission, the Blackbird travels faster, 3,200 feet per second, for up to 90 minutes at a time. No matter how serene it may look, this kind of special speed requires unyielding precision.
You know, Mach 3, boom. The turn radius is something like 100 miles, and they have all these critical fuel problems and other stuff. And so it's not a very spontaneous experience. These are carefully planned, choreographed missions.
With the thunderous clap of a sonic boom, the Blackbird hurtles through the frigid atmosphere, leaving a fiery tail of shock diamonds in its wake. At 2,200 miles an hour, the aircraft becomes superheated from the friction created as the air rushes by.
And indicating Mach 3.0 at this time.
When you go Mach 3, the amount of heat that the whole airframe, everything experiences all this heat, and nothing that they have at the store works. You know, there's no paint, no rubber, nothing. You know, metals, plastics, all this stuff is useless. And they just had to go through so many contortions to make every single part of the plane tolerant of these extreme temperatures.
Temperature affects everything on this airplane. The average person probably is not cognizant of that fact, but the faster you go, the harder things get.
The Lockheed jet is 9/10 titanium, and when they built it, the CIA used a phantom company to buy material from the world's largest supplier, the Soviet Union. In flight, the titanium skin reaches 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, causing it to expand by more than half a foot. This heat-induced expansion posed a real challenge to the Skunk Works team.
When in design they found that the aircraft was heated and then cooled, then the titanium skin would buckle and not return to shape. And they found by longitudinally corrugating the wing and fuselage parts of the aircraft, then the aircraft could go through the heating cycle, cool back down, and return to shape.
One of the puzzles of extreme heat was never really solved.
Sealants for the fuel tanks, they never came up with a polymer that would seal the joints in the skin panels that hold the fuel in, so the Blackbirds sit on the ground and weep. That seems silly. You can look, oh, these stupid guys back in the 60s didn't know what they were doing. There's still no plastic, you know, that can get to 700F and not turn into burnt hot dog oxide.
Once at altitude, the heated skin stretches, sealing the aircraft's fuel cells. But as hard as the Blackbird gets, its heat signature remains low. Built to avoid the passive sweep of Soviet radar, the aircraft, larger than the Boeing 737, was a milestone in early stealth design.
The inward canted tails, the chines that go along the sides, and the materials in the leading edges. There's asbestos and some composites tucked in wedge-shaped sawtooth patterns into some of these surfaces. And the idea of that is to gobble up radar and not reflect it back. I've been told that the Blackbird has a problem on its belly. It's got a belly that has kind of like a boat hull, and that during a shallow turn it may send a great big reflection down at some radar. But it's got a lot smaller radar cross-section than it would have if they hadn't taken precautions to invest in some early stealth work.
In its 30 years of service, only 150 aviators have qualified to fly the SR. It is an elite fraternity. Prior to every Blackbird mission, 36 hours are devoted to prepare men and machine for flight. One of the most valued traits, its maturity. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Finan is 43. All who enter the program must meet one fundamental requirement. They must be married. Most importantly, they must be physically fit. Mach 3 flight challenges both mind and body. At altitude, even a simple toothache can lead to blackouts. The job of preparing the pilots falls to men like Sergeant Lee Labriere.
This is the S-1031C full pressure suit. What it does, it gives the pilot his own environment to survive in case of an ejection or a rapid decompression at altitude. With the SR flying around 80,000 feet, at that altitude, if he were exposed to the environment, all the fluids in his body would evaporate and he wouldn't last more than probably about 5 seconds. So what we do is we give him this suit, and what it does, it keeps him in his own sealed, safe environment. The helmet itself is one size for all the crew members. What we do is we vary the thickness of the helmet liner itself. It has the earphones in it for communication. Of course, his microphone, which he can adjust from the outside of the helmet. This is called the face seal, as he cranks this handle here, it pulls the face seal against his face while pushing the helmet liner itself against the back of his head. And what it does, it actually seals around his entire face, and the whole front of the helmet is oxygenated. Every time he inhales, the regulator senses that and pumps oxygen in through these holes, which serve a dual purpose. What they do is they spray air across the visor, which of course has to be down to provide the seal for the suit itself. So it prevents the visor from fogging, and he's only given oxygen as he needs it. So when he exhales, the regulator stops pumping oxygen into the helmet.
Wait for it, sir.
Men preparing for high-altitude flight must breathe pure oxygen for at least 1 hour before launch to remove all the nitrogen from their blood. This reduces the possibility of the bends.
115?
When you put a person in the airplane, the cost and weight and complexity goes up hugely, because along with a person, you have all this life support stuff. You maybe you're pressurizing the thing. You've got ejection seats. You've got all these instruments and controls and all kinds of stuff that's geared to the person, not to the airplane.
The two-man crew is essential to success. Soon, pilot and reconnaissance systems officer for RSO will be traveling faster than a speeding bullet, while operating some of the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus ever built. They are, in effect, the Blackbird's central nervous system: 2 brains, 2 pairs of eyes, and 2 sets of hands. Without them, this mass of metal and electronics could not function.
Something that's different about flying the SR-71 is the absolute and total man-machine integration. People talk about strapping an airplane on, but I don't believe you strapped an airplane on until you snapped your spurs into the ejection seat, and you hooked up your life support hoses, and you've been given that responsibility.
Before flight, each of the SR's huge power plants require a jump start from 2 454 cubic inch Chevy engines. The whine is deafening, and the streaming tarmac reeks of JP-7, seeping from the plane's unsealed fuel tanks. So much fuel is lost prior to launch that the Blackbird takes off with nearly dry tanks. The SR must join with a waiting tanker just minutes into flight. Slowing this trisonic jet to match the tanker's subsonic speed is anything but easy.
It is a very difficult task for the pilots. That is one of the things that washed people out of the program more than any other part of the regime. The navigator, the RSO, basically found the tanker, got us up behind, and then the pilot was responsible for plugging us in and taking on the fuel. The other thing is that the tanker is very heavy, and at the beginning of the track, the SR is very light. So the SR, it has to slow down because the tanker can only go so fast. So you're fairly close to stall speed in the SR as you hook up. As I said, one of the few things that washed people out of that program was the inability to stay in behind that tanker. As the fuel is transferred into the SR and the tanker begins to accelerate, that helps, but because you keep getting heavier, you stay fairly close to the stall speed all the way to the end.
United 382 Salt Lake, 330.
You always breathe a sigh of relief when you feel the boom kick you off and you know that you're full and you can go again.
15 minutes and 80,000 pounds of fuel later, the Blackbird is ready to retrieve images halfway around the Earth. The Blackbird's global reach was first tested in the war-torn skies of the Middle East. Here, high above the banks of Suez Canal, the prying eyes of the SR-71 helped ease tension and keep a regional conflict from winding into a global war. October 6, 1973, the Egyptian army smashes into Israeli troops along the Sinai. The attack is sudden, ferocious, and well executed. The Israelis are caught woefully unprepared by the assault. To the northeast, Syrian planes slash through Israel's borders high above the Golan Heights. The Arabs are intent on reclaiming land lost to the Israelis in 1967.
Obviously, the outbreak of the war by the Egyptians and Syrians was a surprise, and it should not have been. It was the result of a very clever deception that President Sadat had run. He had run his troops up to the canal sort of regularly every month, saying that this was a reinforcement of the canal and just an exercise as how to do it. So when it happened the 10th time, why, it really didn't evoke that much interest. Our intelligence, everybody's intelligence, failed to see through this plan of Sadat's.
The Israelis rely on a people's army. It will take nearly 2 days to mobilize them. 12-foot-high sand beams defending Israeli positions along the canal were supposed to buy them time to do this. The Egyptians have an ingenious but simple counter. Using high-pressure water hoses, they break through Israelis' defenses in just hours. Soon, they moved nearly 80,000 men and 200 tanks across the canal. Nothing but open desert and a small Israeli fortress lies between the Egyptians and Tel Aviv.
The Egyptian and Israeli armies were almost eyeball to eyeball. And one of the things that we spotted was Scud missiles. And at the same time, we saw that the Israelis were pulling some of their Jericho missiles out of their igloos. So now the escalation was that it could go nuclear.
As the Israelis threaten nuclear escalation, both Americans and Soviets seek to lower the flame on what is soon called the October War. Just days before the assault, Soviet Premier Brezhnev had secretly launched a satellite to monitor events and aid his Egyptian allies. In response, President Richard Nixon soon orders American SR-71s to prepare for missions of their own.
And in that situation, we wanted to know exactly where the Egyptian forces were and where the Israeli forces were, because Mr. Brezhnev had written a message to President Nixon saying, look, you've got to stop the Israeli. We should go in together, Russians and Americans. Well, we didn't want Russians in the Middle East. But then Mr. Brezhnev added the point, and either you come in with me or I'll go in alone. And that was when we said, no, you're not going in alone.
By October 14th, Egyptian fortunes have waned. Counterattacking Israeli troops pins a .8th Army against the canal. In an amazing reversal, Israeli commanders soon prepare to thrust into Cairo itself. But a victorious Israeli army marching into the ancient capital will push most Arab nations over the brink. War will surely engulf the Middle East and send the world economy into a tailspin. Uncertain of just where the opposing armies stand, American leaders have no way to gauge the threat or find a viable solution. Back in America, the SRs are given the green light. Secretly flown from California to Griffiths Air Force Base, New York, ground crews prepared their birds for the longest mission ever. Only personnel with the need to know were informed of the real purpose of the Blackbird's presence.
While we were at Griffiths, it was a very interesting atmosphere because none of the people, the general public or even the average military guy on base, had any idea why we were there. The reason that was explained was that we were conducting training missions and trying out some new equipment. The only thing that made it unusual is that we were sleeping all during the day and staying up all night, so anybody that was watching would know that there was something unusual going on, but they probably would only have thought it was a night flight. So it was interesting from our perspective because we would see our friends, other Air Force people there that weren't connected with the program, and carry on normal conversations, and they would be asking us about how the equipment was working and those kinds of things, and yet we knew inside that we were basically preparing for these very important missions. So it was just kind of an interesting dichotomy.
Neither Arabs nor Israelis have been told of the impending overflights. The American planes have been denied the use of airstrips in England. The British are fearful of antagonizing the oil-rich Arabs, thus adding a transatlantic crossing to an already difficult job.
The primary thing was that we were flying from the east coast of the United States over a lot of water to get to the areas that we were conducting the reconnaissance. Tremendous pressure in terms of knowing that if anything went wrong, you could be in headlines tomorrow. So the areas that we wanted to conduct the reconnaissance over, there were a lot of politically sensitive borders that you wanted to avoid. So flying those missions required a lot of concentration. The navigation system provided you all the information you needed in order to be exactly where you wanted to be. But there was a little extra concentration on our part in order to make the take good.
Throughout the fall of 1973, unexplained sonic booms reverberate across the northeastern seaboard of the United States. Local newspapers report them as meteoric disturbances. Unknown to most, it is the sound of Blackbird pilots returning from the Middle East after a grueling 10-hour mission. A mission that includes 11 mid-air refuelings in 5 hours of Mach 3 flight. The Blackbirds bring with them an incredible bounty. Their cameras can survey an enormous area, 100,000 square miles, in a single mission. Incredibly, the Americans decide to share these images with all of the parties involved, Egyptians, Israelis, and Syrians. Soon, hundreds of photographs are sent to their leaders in Cairo, Tel Aviv, and Damascus.
To my knowledge, this is the first time we've ever given photography, which is considered highly sensitive to both sides. You had people in the agency that were violently opposed to allowing the film from cameras that were top secret to be obtained by a potential adversary, basically. Not only that, they were opposed to the sharing, saying that if this material gets out, then people know the capabilities of our systems, then they can take countermeasures. That's always a danger. No one will speak of the capabilities of cameras because if they know that you can see objects, say, 2 feet on the ground, then they're going to take camouflage, concealment, and deception methods. Peace in the Middle East was worth the revealing of our camera capabilities.
By October 23rd, a ceasefire is in place. The pictures serve as evidence that neither side is engaging in a military buildup. It is hoped that they will ease tensions and maintain the peace. By 1974, a new commander-in-chief supervises Blackbird flights over the Sinai. CIA officials use a diorama in briefing President Gerald Ford on the situation.
These are real big boards. And there was a complete map of the Sinai. And it would show the battle lines. It would show the where the concentration of tanks were. It would show the results of airstrikes. It was a very comprehensive thing. All the information that we could possibly squeeze out of the SR-71 mission was squeezed out.
Photo images taken by American spy planes helped create a trust between Egyptian and Israeli that eventually leads to the Camp David Peace Accords of 1976. American aircraft maintain that trust to this very day. By United Nations resolution, overflights of the Sinai continue, and the intelligence gathered is still shared. Ironically, the mission is now carried out by the Blackbird's predecessor, the U-2. Advances in satellite technology, budget cuts, and the end of the Cold War had led to critics to claim that the spy plane's days are numbered. Evidence suggests that the next generation of hypersonic reconnaissance jets may not have been that far off. That even now, men are streaking to the edge of space faster than ever before. Hundreds of seismic recorders buried in the desert around Los Angeles serve as an early warning system for earthquakes. Since 1991, the recorders have been rocked by unidentified sonic booms originating hundreds of miles off the California coast. Scientists of the U.S. Geological Survey have discovered the unique and incredible mark that these sonic booms have left in their wake.
If something is traveling very high over the area, the footprint of the sonic boom is also going to be very wide. That's one reason we think that whatever is causing this large sonic boom is traveling relatively high, because the boom was felt all over the coastal area, and we recorded it over quite a wide area here. One reason that we're very good at identifying sonic booms is that we see the space shuttle land here several times a year. When it does land, we can track it across our instruments and estimate the height, the speed, and the direction very accurately. So when we saw other sonic booms, we tried to do the same kind of thing. The first one of these unusual sonic booms we saw was in June '91, and since then we've seen about 8 or 10 very similar ones, and they caught our attention because they happened always at the same time of day on Thursday mornings, which was a little unusual. When you stare at these waveforms and these bumps and wiggles that we see in our record, the mystery one seems to be probably something smaller. The frequency content is different, and it doesn't have that very characteristic N wave that we see very often for the shuttle or the SR-71.
These people may have got a glimpse, some of them, of something being tested that maybe will be built someday, or maybe it was a loser, or maybe the funding didn't come through. Who knows?
For example, it could have been a meteorite, but the fact that it's always coming on Thursday morning probably rules out that possibility. It's not the space shuttle, it's not the SR-71, because there were no scheduled flights, and also the signature looks very different. So after we rule that out, basically all we can say is something is flying faster than the speed of sound offshore the coast of Southern California.
And the only thing I'm really aware of that's got some substance to it is this remarkable photo, which has come to be known as the Donuts on a Rope exhaust contrail photograph, which was taken by a photographer named Steve Douglas in Amarillo, Texas. And it shows this unusual dotty exhaust contrail. Instead of looking like a line of chalk across a blue sky, it looks like boop, 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 boop. And now that's different. It was published in Aviation Week, and it ran in Popular Science, and it got attention, like, what is this? And there were reports of unusual loud rumbling and stuff accompanying this thing, and it's not a bad looking photograph. It doesn't have that murky UFO look that you come to mistrust.
Unannounced, and usually at night, the Pentagon's newest aircraft make their maiden voyages across the desert sky. Like the SR-71 and the U-2, today's black projects are born at a remote desert testing facility in Nevada called Groom Dry Lake or Area 51. The Pentagon denies that the facility exists. Ironically, pictures of it do, taken by Russian spy satellites and now for sale to the highest bidder. The desert tract surrounding Groom Lake had become a mecca for aviation and UFO enthusiasts. Even the state of Nevada has recognized the site's unique commercial appeal. But occasionally Air Force testing leads to real clues like unusual noises or strange contrails. Some engineers attribute this puffy contrail photographed over Texas to a pulse detonation wave engine, the next generation in aerial propulsion.
It's a non-continuous type of combustion. A jet engine is a device that just it just runs all the time. You know, your car is going bang, 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 bang. A jet just runs continuously. Well, this pulsed combustion engine, it is a design that goes boom, 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 boom. It doesn't run continuously. And presumably such an engine could make a contrail that looked puffy.
To many, uncovering proof of classified government programs is a game of cat and mouse. Skunk Works team member Ben Rich was Kelly Johnson's right-hand man for over 20 years. Rich was fascinated by the persistence of aviation enthusiasts in trying to prove that the Black Project exists. But he remained most enamored with the marvel that he and Kelly Johnson built over 35 years ago. Biography Rich said, "Had we built the Blackbird in the year 2010, the world would still have been awed by such an achievement." Just before his death, he refused to comment about the future projects on the Skunk Works agenda, and when asked about the Donuts on a Rope photograph, he left only questions behind.
And so I said, you know, Ben, this is the one really intriguing thing that's sort of a piece of evidence. And I said, what am I supposed to make of this? And he said, well, Stu, for you and I to talk about that anymore, you'd have to have a need to know.
Like most Cold Warriors, the Blackbird faces an uncertain future, but more than once it has been retired, only to be pulled back into service in a time of need. Those who flew the SR say that no satellite will ever match its flexibility. They say that without a high-speed reconnaissance aircraft, America will be left wanted. Enemy missiles could never catch it, but budget cuts eventually did. Meanwhile, those who know the true cause of the sonic booms now rattling the California coastline are keeping the secrets to themselves.
There was a day in 2011 when I'm told I was the highest person on Earth. Literally. On that day, I traveled to the space equivalent altitude of 70,000 feet.
Thanks so much. We'll see you tomorrow.
It was a voyage to the edge of infinity. For a few minutes that I will remember for the rest of my life, I stared through the frost formed on the canopy of our aircraft as deeply as I could into forever. I'm Gary Sinise, and this was my High Flight.
Thank you so much.
There will be a time on Wednesday when you're the highest person on Earth.
Congratulations on that. Yeah.
You got it. That'll be good for the wall.
How are you? I'm Gary. Thank you.
Over the years, I've been blessed with many opportunities to visit our servicemen and women in the distant and often dangerous places where they live and work. In 2010, through a friend of mine who worked for the USO, I was invited to take a flight on the legendary U-2 spy plane. As enthusiastic as I was, I didn't fully realize all that a U-2 flight involved. By the time I boarded an airliner to return home, I would have met a group of people and flown to a place I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Beale is an 86,000-acre base that was opened in October of 1942 as an Army training site for armored and infantry divisions. It also served as a prisoner of war encampment during World War II. It transferred to the Air Force in 1948. The 9th Reconnaissance Wing is a highly specialized group of more than 3,000 personnel in 4 groups: the 9th Mission Support Group, the 9th Medical Group, the 9th Maintenance Group, and the 9th Operations Group. And Beale is headquarters for our U-2 program. The U-2 Dragonlady is one of the most amazing defense systems ever developed by the United States. She is a baby boomer. She was born in the 1950s when we began to realize just how little we knew about the newly emerging superpower, the Soviet Union. Once the USSR became a nuclear power, it became a matter of national security that we find a way to carry out reconnaissance over her. Doing that meant flying at an altitude higher than any defensive aircraft or surface-to-air missile could reach. That meant flying to a height considered the very definition of space. Design of such a watershed airplane became a priority of the legendary Kelly Johnson at Lockheed Martin's Advanced Development Programs, better known as the Skunk Works. Johnson was an aeronautical genius who developed over 40 aircraft, including the P-38 Lightning, the P-80 Shooting Star, the F-104 Starfighter, and the SR-71 Blackbird.
The U-2 program, like many successful military programs, began in the political environment. So after World War II ended, obviously political tension develops between the Soviet Union and the United States. There was very little known about the interior of the Soviet Union. So in 1953 to 54, the United States secretly ballots a program to produce an airplane that can fly above the suspected ranges of surface-to-air missiles at that time. And Clarence Kelly Johnson and his Skunk Works come out, and he says, I can take an F-104 Starfighter. I can take that fuselage, and I can take the wings off, and I can marry it to extremely efficient glider wings, high aspect ratio wings, long, thin wings that are extremely efficient up high. Their target altitude was 66,000 feet. So the first U-2 flies in 1955. And in 1956, we employed it operationally for the first time for the overflight mission of the interior of the Soviet Union. May 1st, 1960, when Gary Powers was shot down, did two things. One, it exposed the U-2 program. Khrushchev made it so. And the second thing it did, even in that particular airplane's demise, was confirm for us that the Soviets did in fact have missiles that could reach that high. And really through the ingenuity of its engineers, its pilots, we've taken this Cold War system and morphed how we employ it so that it becomes relevant and effective at pretty much all levels of war.
In the over 50 years of the U-2 Dragonlady's existence, barely 1,000 pilots have ever flown her.
So this wall is all of our solo wall. Every pilot that has soloed the jet, been alone and unafraid in the U-2, has his name and his solo number up on a plaque.
On another wall in Beale's Officers Club are the portraits of those who have lost their lives while serving in the U-2 program. This is truly sanctified ground. I was starting to understand what a rare opportunity I was being given. The chance to join the High Flyers Club, to go to the top of the Dragonlady's ride, 70,000 feet. That's twice as high as any commercial airliner flies. It's 40,000 feet higher than Mount Everest, the world's tallest mountain. If it all goes well, for a few incomparable minutes, I will be the highest human on the planet.
There you go, bud. Thank you for serving. Thank you. Squeeze in.
After all these years of traveling in support of our troops, it is likely that I've been on more military bases than many of those who actually serve in the armed forces. I'm impressed with every visit. Our bases are special places, islands of efficiency, productivity, orderliness, and civility. They are places that stick with you, that inspire you to do a little better and be a little better when you return to your own neighborhood. It was a great welcome to Beale. The first steps you take to get to 70,000 feet are toward the flight surgeon's office. This whole adventure can end right here.
So for a high flight or high altitude flight, things we look for include one, making sure that they'll fit into the ejection seat and can safely eject. So it's unique to each airframe, has different parameters, and so we just got to make sure that they're kind of meeting the standards for that, and that's the first thing we look at. Second one relates a lot to decompression sickness, the idea of kind of going from a high pressure situation up to a low pressure area. When that happens, we have gases in our body that will kind of off gas into our bloodstream, much like opening a bottle of Coca-Cola or product like that, where you can then get a bunch of bubbles that pop out. And as a result of that, it can lead to some problems that we would have to later use a hyperbaric treatment or a hyperbaric chamber to treat. And things we also want to look at is because gas expands, if there's ear sinus issues going on, or they can't clear those areas, or if they have dental pain, dental pressures, again, that gas in those areas can expand and create a lot of problems. So we wouldn't want them to fly if we had those issues in the mix.
It's all good?
Yep.
To be honest, I do have a few problems with my ears and sinus, and I have never been to 70,000 feet before. I'm anxious to go, but I'm also a little apprehensive.
Mr. Sneeze, this is your 1042. It's your clearance to fly. Go up to altitude and get on the plane.
Great. I'm good to go.
You're good to go, sir. Have a nice flight.
Great. Thank you.
70,000 feet is a hostile environment for human beings. At that altitude, a catastrophic loss of pressure will cause your bodily fluids to begin to boil within seconds. So, there are some things you have to know and do before the Air Force takes you to the edge of space. Jay Ford will be the pilot for our mission. Confident, measured, calm, prepared, irreverent, funny.
Ejection, so our controlled ejection altitude, we want to be at least 2,000 feet above the ground. If for some reason the airplane goes out of control today, we want to eject immediately. We don't want to wait. No, but I'll let you know if that happens. So,
please do.
Yes. Physiological incident, so if at any time during the flight you're feeling bad or funny, or you just have any questions about, hey, why do I feel this way, ask, let me know. So, bad news does not get better with age, and especially if it's, bubbles in your brain and spinal column. So we can do a little bit to fix those. So let me know, and if you're having any sort of GI problems, let that gas out as it's starting to build up. Don't hold it in, and keep holding it, and then things can get messy. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hi, guys.
Jump on in.
You want me in this one? All right.
I mean, everybody that comes out here is already, they're already a good pilot. So it's just a matter of...
You like being alone.
I do.
You're up there by yourself for how long? Could be
12
10
plus
hours?
hours. Yeah.
12 plus hours just flying.
So you get used to it to a certain extent, but yeah, it is hard on the body. So, but the altitude that you're at, that will be inside in the airplane is about 28,000 to 29,000 feet. So if you think about it, you're sitting on top of Mount Everest for,
right.
You land and you feel like you got run over by a truck sometimes. So, and then
is that one gonna?
Yep, he's going out.
That one leaving?
Yes, sir.
How are you? I'm Gary.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Darcy.
Thank you. Hi.
Welcome, sir. Name's Heather. Going to be teaching
Heather?
you about the full pressure suit today.
Fantastic. Thank you.
The physiology briefing is an attention getter, to say the least. I started learning what can happen to the body at altitude, and I was introduced to my newest best friend, my spacesuit.
Basically, open this guy up. You should be able to feel that it's open, and we go ahead and just add a little bit of air volume, close off the suit just a little bit. You'll feel the suit. You don't want to fully inflate it, but just add a little bit of extra.
A loss of pressure in the airplane instantly makes the spacesuit my life support system. There are any number of dangers to humans at 70,000 feet, which can result in a very bad day.
Will somebody be asking me how I'm feeling, or, and I'm just describing what's going on with me?
Absolutely, yeah. So Jessica's gonna...
There's hypoxia, which is deficiency in the amount of oxygen reaching the tissues. At first you feel euphoric, just before you become totally incapacitated. Decompression sickness. This is what scuba divers call the bends. It too can be fatal. Altitude sickness. Illness caused by swift ascent to a high altitude, resulting in a shortage of oxygen, characterized by hyperventilation, nausea, and exhaustion. Heather Fox, the U-2 pilot who led the briefing, knows her subject and the symptoms all too well.
In about February 2009, was flying a op sortie over Afghanistan and started to feel bad with a decompression sickness. Basically started having symptoms of nausea, vertigo, a little trouble staying conscious, felt like I was going to pass out. So at that point, realized it was decompression sickness and started the turn towards my home base. Although ejecting at the location I was at probably would not have worked out very well, so at that point the choice was to bring the aircraft back. It was about a 4-hour flight home, which was probably the worst 4 hours of my life, I must say, and just started the flight towards home. I will say that we've got folks up here doing this every day, and most of the time it goes well. So this isn't something that happens to a lot of folks, but it happened to me that day. But it's something we all know that's out there, and gladly do it to support the troops that we're supporting on the ground. It's something that we want to do.
They call getting fitted for your spacesuit integration, and it is a process.
level 300. There you go. Good job.
So we're gonna get your helmet locked onto the suit. Bear with us. Okay.
They had some trouble fitting my face shield and seemed a little concerned about it for a while.
Now, so when you put the mask back on, just press on, because there's an aluminum strip around your face. So you might want to just press down so they actually conform to your face. Sorry? It should go like this.
And breathe. 1.1, 800. All right, that was successful. We're moving on. Yay!
The Barca lounges they use are really comfortable, but after you lie there for a few minutes, you have a little time to reflect. I remember one of the crew asking what I was thinking. To be honest, I was thinking, I'm glad my wife doesn't know all that's involved in this. You start getting ready to fly by pre-breathing pure oxygen. You do 10 or 12 minutes on the elliptical machine to really start sucking it in. This pre-breathing of pure oxygen eliminates the nitrogen from the blood and tissues, minimizing the risk of the bends I mentioned earlier. Once this process starts, you can't breathe normal air again. You have to hold your breath while putting your helmet on. Then carry the auxiliary unit with you, so you continue to breathe only pure oxygen. I was starting to get a bit tired, but my day was only beginning. To help me recognize the onset of hypoxia or other altitude-related illnesses, the team placed me in the altitude chamber.
3, 2, 1.
Passing through flight level 300. There you go. Good job.
The first thing that I'm looking for is make sure that he's feeling comfortable in the suit. He's comfortable moving around in it while it's fully inflated at altitude. That he knows where a lot of the things that Heather mentioned earlier today are, the vent air, the controller, how to be able to use that, how to be able to urinate, to be able to identify his hypoxia symptoms, because that's very important. There's not going to be anybody sitting back there with him, so he definitely is going to need to be able to identify those on his own.
Remember, you're talking to an actor.
Remember what I said about ear troubles? I really felt them in the chamber. Watch what happens to the beaker of water when the altitude simulated in the chamber reaches 60,000 feet. At that height, the air pressure is so low, your normal body temperature of 98.6 degrees will boil your own body's fluids. Things that make you think. Still not done. Now I have to learn the art of egress, getting out of the U-2 if something should go wrong on the ground or in the air. Of course, if you do find yourself hanging from a parachute at 70,000 feet, you also need to know how to control it. Ouch. This night, the leadership at Beale hosted a dinner for us. It is such an honor to be able to talk with these folks. They are the best in the world at what they do. I hope they understand the degree to which they all inspire and sustain the rest of us. All I can say is, God bless our troops. I retire a tired man. I feel like I've been drinking from an informational fire hose all day. It all kind of runs together. I don't know how much I actually remember. If something did happen, would I really be able to save myself? Well, there's no turning back. Tomorrow, I will visit a place I have never seen before and will likely never see again. It all starts to feel slightly surreal. I'm certainly ready to sleep. I only hope I can. many ways, it's just another day at the office for my pilot, Jay Ford. Over a light breakfast, we went over the flight plan again. Essentially, we'll just be making a big loop over Northern California. The apprehension I took to bed last night has left me. Let's do this. Jay takes a final look at the anticipated weather. Great news. We're going to encounter severe clear. With a little luck, I might be able to see forever.
Hey, thank you very much. Thanks for serving the USA. You folks are awesome. It's great to be here.
Thank you for your support.
You bet.
Have a safe flight, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Is it possible to feel like a veteran without actually having flown in the airplane yet?
Folks, we got a timetable to meet. We got someone to get into a suit, 2 people actually. But last night I was able to tell Mr. Sinise that our motto that we always cheer in big groups is very fitting for him today. But for his high point today, we want to hook him up. Get him high! There you go. Have a great flight. Thank you very much.
Yesterday, I had trouble with my gloves, my faceplate. I fumbled the fitting of those personal collection devices everyone always is so curious about when one is wearing a spacesuit. I worried about holding my breath long enough to put my helmet on and get the pure oxygen flowing through it. But today, well, I feel like I've been here before. In fact, I'm a little surprised at how much of my training I do recall. I'm ready. This is so cool. I admit it. I've always been a space groupie. When I was preparing to play astronaut Ken Mattingly in Ron Howard's Apollo 13, I got to meet Jim Lovell and a number of the astronauts. I met Gene Kranz, the flight director, who did so much to get that badly damaged craft and her crew home. I sat in the NASA mission control room where it all took place and let my imagination have its way. There was a space shuttle launch about the time we were starting to film. I just had to see it. I flew down to the Cape and just went out by myself to stand with the others who had gathered to watch. I was mesmerized. I watched the ignition, this great and terrible belch of smoke and fire coming from the huge nozzles at the bottom of the shuttle and its tanks. There was a slight delay while the sound and shock waves rolled across the water to the observation area. When they hit, I could literally feel them in my chest, clear to my heart. What an emotional experience. I'm truly sorry for anyone who did not have the opportunity to see a shuttle launch in person. As an actor, I'm used to playing parts. The spacesuit certainly brings back memories of roles I'd played. But this is no role. It is about to get very real. First, they integrate you into your spacesuit. Then you and your spacesuit have to be integrated into the airplane.
Press the button there.
I had to test my ability to reach those levers and handles I would have to pull if it became necessary to get out of the U-2 for any reason. There comes a moment when you have to arm your ejection seat. If you have to make an emergency exit, there is an explosive charge that literally blows your entire seat out of the plane with you in it. I was keenly aware that I was sitting on a bomb.
And through your
Engine start is approved, cleared to Beale Airport. As filed, on departure of flight runway heading, maintain flight level 230. Expect flight level 600 5 minutes after departure. NORCA departure frequency 353.7, squawk 4454. Actual departure is on request.
And 4454 on the squawk for Opinion 9 or 2. Yeah, Opinion 9 2 is ready to taxi. We'll be making the right turn out of parking, proceed down to Bravo.
Opinion 9-2, make right turn out of parking. Runway 15, taxi via Gulf, Bravo.
15 Golf Bravo for Opinion 9-2. Off we go!
So begins a journey like none other I have ever taken. The traditional salute to the dedicated ground crew that keeps this extraordinary bird flying. I know the camera crews are out there somewhere. Whatever happens, there'll be pictures. And there are the chase cars. Funny thing about the U-2, it is flown by one pilot, but it can't actually be flown by one pilot. That's because when the U-2 tries to land, its high aspect ratio wings do not want to stop flying. The only way to get it back to the ground is by effecting a complete stall at just the right height over the runway. So other U-2 pilots in chase cars called mobiles must race along and tell the pilot in the plane exactly where he or she is in relation to the ground at every moment. Look at those incredible wings. They are so long they have to be supported by little wheels on the ends called pogo wheels. The pogos have to cleanly drop off as soon as the plane is airborne, and then be removed from the runway. That is why the chase car mobiles are needed on takeoff as well.
Build tower, stand by, sir. Two build tower, short runway 15.
Holding short 15, Opinion 9-2. At Bravo, holding short ready.
Opinion 2, task for departure approved, runway 15 and 160 at 6, cleared for takeoff, change departure.
Detective departure approved, cleared for takeoff, Opinion 9-2. Alright, you ready to go?
Roger that.
Ready as we're gonna be. Alright.
We are cleared to go. I can't believe how the U-2 just pops into the air. An airliner needs 5,000 feet, a mile or so, to gain enough airspeed to take off. We're off in less than a tenth of that, only 400 or 500 feet. This U-2 is so smooth, I almost feel serene inside it. Yet the altimeter clearly shows it is climbing like a homesick angel.
Okay, good morning. Opinion 9-2 with you. 3,000 climbing 230.
Opinion 902, that's the bird, ready to contact.
You looking outside?
Oh yeah. Figure 51 ready.
Alright, if you want to, you can open your T-block and do as you please at this point. You probably only get open a little bit. You get a pretty good amount of air through there.
It sounds strange to say it, but so far the flight feels like a relaxing breather from all the intense training I've been doing for it.
Oakland Center, good morning, Pinion 92 with you, 19.8, climbing 230, direct Pinion.
Pinion 92, Oakland Center, climb out above flight level 600.
At or above 60, Pinion 92.
Jay has a mirror so he can see me. I didn't know till we got up there that that was the only way Jay and I could make eye contact. The altimeter continues to spin higher, higher.
So we're at almost 29,000?
Yep, just passing through 29, approaching 30. And we've been airborne for about 5 minutes.
That's fast.
Yeah. You went from the bottom of Mount Everest all the way to the top in 5 minutes, and I don't know, I think most people train for like 4 months to try and do that.
Your perspective really changes quickly. Man-made objects look like toys, if you can see them at all. Mountains start to look like sand dunes or snow mounds. Like Jay said, we are higher than Everest's 29,000 feet in no time. My cockpit sits about a foot higher than Jay's. That's why in level flight, I will be the highest person on Earth when we top out.
It's a pretty view up here.
Yes, it is. It gets better, too.
It's very special. So I can see how you get a little hooked on this.
Yeah, it's pretty darn special. Alright, so here's 45,000 feet. So we'll just continue to set new personnel altitude records for you for the rest of the day.
That did not take long.
No. Alright, so there's 50,000 feet, our cabin altitude, so your body it's sitting at is at 24,000 feet, almost 25. So we'll gain over another 20,000 feet, but cabin altitude's can only go up about another 5.
Very comfortable right now.
Yeah. Yeah, Pinion 92 passing 52,000 feet in the green.
Airlines copies in the green. Mobile copies in the green, have a good flight.
Thank you.
Where are you from, Jay?
I'm from Georgia originally. I grew up there, born in Albany, down to the south, and we moved north of Atlanta when I was 2.
And you joined the Air Force when?
1998. So I went to the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs, and got my degree in computer science. And I went to Mississippi for a year for pilot training at Columbus Air Force Base, and then moved back to Georgia to Robbins Air Force Base down by Macon, and I was there for 4.5 years before I came here. Okay, well, fairly. Yep, there's 60. So we are now well above the space equivalent zone where if we didn't have the suit and we stepped outside, you'd boil to death. Followed shortly thereafter by freezing to death, since it's almost minus 60 degrees centigrade outside.
Well, let's stay inside.
Yeah, I like that idea.
The U-2 is not an easy airplane to fly. The thinner the atmosphere, the faster the plane has to go in order for the wings to provide adequate lift. To maintain the required airspeed at 70,000 feet, the U-2 has to fly at the top edge of its speed envelope. If it drops by even 5 or 10 knots, the wing can stall. If that happens, the plane can become uncontrollable. U-2 pilots call this narrow operating window the coffin corner.
This is incredible. Wow.
Yeah, it really is. It never gets old. Best view in the world.
Getting a little darker up there.
Yes, it is. Yeah, if you look up towards the sun, the sky is pretty much totally black up there. And then as you look closer to the Earth, where most of the atmosphere is, since we're above most of it now, you get that nice thin blue line of all the stuff that keeps us alive. But do stay hydrated.
Okay, I'll keep drinking. I'm making movies back here.
Awesome.
We are really up here. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Coming up on 66,000. Well, can you see that the Earth is indeed round?
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Just, you get almost speechless.
Yeah, using words to describe what it feels like and looks like to be up here is just not adequate.
It's just so smooth. It feels like a glider. I have to remember to stay hydrated while I'm up here. At 70,000 feet, we are twice as high as any airliner I have ever flown in. There is a vastness out there that I can feel to the depths of my being, but that I cannot describe in words. I fully understand why some astronauts have felt compelled to become writers and painters. At some point, even the prominent geographic features on Earth, like mountains and large lakes, become so small you almost feel like you are leaving them behind. When you travel to the outer edge of everything you have ever known, a sense of isolation starts to set in. I thought of the expression, Mother Earth, we use so glibly, and it suddenly seemed deeply profound.
Mom, I'm home.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Alrighty.
Incredible. Wow. Look at that reception party.
People are here.
I returned to God's good earth a different person. I leave Beale Air Force Base a far richer man. Emerson wrote that there is no history, only biography. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of biographies attached to the U-2 Dragonlady. From Kelly Johnson to Francis Gary Powers to Jay Ford. There have been thousands of dedicated airmen on the ground that have kept her flying. There are countless gallant soldiers who are alive today because a U-2 was there to tell them what awaited them over the next sand dune. I leave Beale, as I leave so many military bases, with a deep and profound appreciation for those who serve our country in harm's way. Remember, this is an all-volunteer force. These are men and women who believe so deeply in the core principles of America, they willingly offer their lives to defend them. No greater love has any man or woman than to lay down his or her life for another. I thought about that up there on the purple edge of space with my life in Jay Ford's hands. And I thought about it when I touched back down on the ground after seeing the Earth in a way I had never seen before and will likely never see her again. I'm Gary Sinise, and that was my high flight. I wish you could have been there.
Hi, I'm Gary Sinise. I hope you enjoyed High Flight. And for information about the Gary Sinise Foundation's mission to serve and honor the needs of our defenders, veterans, first responders, their families, and those in need, please visit our website at www.GarySiniseFoundation.org. Thank you.